Hi all, this is Skate, and this is a video, obviously, about the FV217 Badger. Or Badger Esquire, if you want to go by Wargaming's name for it. Which I have to comment, I've just got to comment on it. I get the Badger camo. Looks like a badger, it's called a Badger. Makes sense. But then we have the tea time attachment, and Esquire. Now, how many British cliches can you jam into one tank? Now, I may be living in the wrong part of the country, guys, but I cannot remember the last time I saw a damn Badger, which, if it's going to have a fake title like Esquire, is obviously going to be middle class, which means he's going to be sipping his afternoon tea with his little finger pointing out. But no, I must have bought a house in the least affluent area of the country, because Badgers I know are... Not that I have any friends like Badgers, but Badgers I know are fairly aggressive animals. Which is why I kind of went, you know what, the Badger camo kind of goes with this tank. And then I saw a Squire and thought, really? A fake middle class title? On something you're going to call a Badger? They kind of don't go hand in hand. In fact, I would say they're opposite ends of the spectrum to one another. One implies, yes, he has afternoon tea and crumpets. The other implies, get too close and I'm going to rip your damn face off. So I just felt like they were just trying to jam some British things together and hope it stuck. But anyway, that is enough rambling and possibly ranting about the name of the tank. Let's talk about the actual tank. Because if a tank comes in a crate, and a high-priced crate at that, it implies that it's going to be a little bit... pay to win is probably the wording I'm looking for. Which means it's going to be really strong. So how does the Badger fare up in that assessment? Well, we'll start with the Frontal Armor, which we know is ridiculously strong. And we will skip halfway through this video, my apologies, to have a look at the armor here quickly on my phone. This is the armor structure of this tank, and I want to show you a couple of tips how to destroy this thing. Okay, we're flicking through the frontal armor, 215 over the vast majority, 185 on the front lower area, and the lower plate outer area is 197mm thick, which means you don't want to be shooting at them. The best place to shoot this, if it's exposed, is the middle of the front lower plate. You're not going to pen anything else, really, without premium ammunition. In fact, just load premium ammunition when you see one of these things. And if you see one of these things hull down, this is when it becomes an absolute nightmare. There is no point. Leave it alone and go and deal with something else on its team or relocate. Because the lower plate, yes, it's an easy shot in the middle. This is what's causing all the fuss. Give this thing 10 degrees of gun depression and you're ranging between 390 and 500mm thick. I mean, check out the gun mantlet, 972mm of effective thickness. Just don't waste your time. But if this thing's hull down on a ridge, get away from it. I know that sounds ridiculous, but you're not going to penetrate it at this sort of position. You might get lucky and get some shots just above the tracks into the lower areas of the casement, which I'm trying to highlight here, but they're hard shots. The best recommendation I would personally make is HE at this point. It sounds ridiculous, but bear with me on it. You see the two hatch areas on either side of the gun sticking forward. Well, fire HE just above them, because the armour on top of them is only 65mm thick. Obviously, you're not going to penetrate from that angle, but you're going to splash into that vicinity, which means you are going to cause more damage. And this is why I think this tank is hugely situational with its armour, because if it's not using its gun depression, its armour's pants in my eyes. I mean, these spots all highlighted here, an E100 can penetrate with AP all day long. If a Badger is face-hugging you, it is doing it wrong. And you can take advantage of that as long as we know where to shoot the damn thing. That is where you want to shoot, because you can reach them with an E100 in a face-hug situation. In fact, with a lot of tanks you can. And if we're not talking frontal, it's a really easy pen on this tank everywhere else. 38mm. Personally, I'd be firing HE at that all day long, or if you want to guarantee an overmatch and get a real nasty roll, try and get one on top of the engine deck or even on the back sloped angle. So this thing is only effective when it's using gun depression and it's hull down. In that circumstance, it's ridiculously effective, and I know it is ridiculously effective in that circumstance. But this is Blitz, our maps are not huge, and as a result, it cannot stay hull down in one spot for the entire game. If it does, then just go and cap and draw it out. because when it's not hull down, I mean, that frontal armor is ridiculous with the gun depression. But just leave it alone. Screw it. If it's going to stay there, it's going to lose, because all his team is going to die around it, and you can just go cap and bait the little thing out. Even all this frontal armor, if you're pointing down at its gun in a close situation, you can penetrate most of its front. I'd still aim for these spots, because there's a good chance of getting HE, and if you've got good gun depression with a large tank. But the armor, as a result, is great in the right situation. And it's great providing people don't know where to penetrate it. As soon as you take it out of that perfect circumstance, it becomes a lot more vulnerable. And then the mobility comes into it. I mean, this circumstance, my tank is godlike right now. I'm not concerned about what is shooting at me in the slightest, because it's just the top of me exposed. I can just eat things. I mean, the tank is godlike in that position, but as I keep saying, it's only that position. Now, if you were one of those tanks, and we know this tank is coming out, and you know how to deal with it, what you'd be doing there is just getting back into cover, not sticking your head out, not wasting time, and you'd be baiting me out of this position I am in, and into a position where I have to get down there as quick as I can. But of course, this happens with any new heavily armoured tank which comes out. People don't know how to penetrate it straight away. As time progresses, we learn. Most of us do. But I overexposed myself then, and they went straight through my lower plate. But that was my fault. I overexposed myself. And that actually reminds me, one of the comments someone said to me today is, a Super Unicum or a Unicum will be OP in this tank. And my answer was, well yeah, obviously. They're Super Unicum because they're OP in most tanks. And it's true when you think about it. A good player will learn how to manipulate this tank very, very quickly. And a good player will play to this tank's strengths. A bad player will not. So yes, a good player will be very, very strong in this tank. That being said, a good player will also learn how to very quickly take this thing out. But like I said, it's a new tank, and that'll take time. Like that Death Star. He did like sod all damage to the front of me. If he waited a second and fired above those two hatches on the front, just above it, it would have splashed onto the weaker, thinner armor, which means you would have done considerably more damage. And then we come on to the gun. Now the gun is very good. In terms of damage per minute, if you're running a rammer, you are looking 3,449 damage per minute. If you're running calibrated shells, you go down to 3,200. If you're going to pick one of these... Well, actually no, let me rephrase. If you're going to try and pick one of these things up, run the calibrated shells, because it's got below average penetration. It has 280 millimeters of penetration, so yes, you will drop it down to 3,200 damage per minute, but you take the 280 mil with the calibrated shells up to 294. Now, I would say most people in this thing will probably run calibrated shells, which means you can assume, in theory, 3,200 damage per minute. At that point, a lot of tier 10 medium tanks can out-DPM one of these things. A lot of tank destroyers can out-DPM one of these things. So its DPM is good, but it's not top of the ranks in any shape or form. Its gun, by the way, though, is ridiculously accurate. It's got a beautiful aim time, and it's just on point. And its accuracy, 0.299. Again, its accuracy is on point. This game, by the way, is in realistic mode. And I kind of feel a bit cruel and sadistic, because nobody's ever played against one of these things before. So taking it into realistic mode kind of made people go, where do I penetrate that thing? So I felt a bit mean. But this game will highlight exactly how this tank can shine. Because I can keep this ridge for a long time. Half the time because people forget I'm here, because unless you're pointing directly at me, the tank obviously goes off radar. But other than that, they just don't know how to penetrate me, so they give up. Now, in the same situation, that's what I would do. But I tell you what, I wouldn't give up and ignore and then keep working in front of it. You'd relocate, because that brings us on to the mobility on this thing. 30 km/h top speed. It's not great, but it also doesn't really have a lot of puff. So if you're going up big hills, it feels like it runs out quickly. On top of that, it just feels sluggish. And Its traverse is god-awful. I mean, it's got slower traverse speed than a T110E3, so it doesn't turn quickly. And this is why this thing, I genuinely think, if something gets on its back, will just pick it apart stupidly quickly, or even gets on its side, or even tracks it like these two. If these two came at me now, I think they forgot I'm here, but if they came at me at the same time, I would have no hope whatsoever. I really wouldn't. With some turretless tank destroyers, when a medium gets up your butt, you can pry them off, push them off, using the weight and the power of the tank. This thing can't do that. It just doesn't have the oomph to do it. So yeah, in regards to the tank in general, guys, I honestly think it is a very good tank. I also think it's not OP, if I'm honest. But I also think it's very situational. In certain circumstances, it will be insanely good. And in other circumstances, I think it will be very easy to pick apart. I can only speak from my personal circumstances. And I can't remember if I've said this in the video already, but I'm going to explain anyway. Just in case. But I've played every tier 10 tank destroyer. And I played this for a good run last night. And so far, this, if it was in my normal account, would be my lowest average damage tier 10 tank destroyer. The flip side, it is actually one of my highest average win rate tank destroyers. But one of the lowest by a fair margin on damage. Now, again, like I said, I can only speak from my personal experience, but I don't think the thing's OP. I think it's a very good tank, like I said. I definitely think it's very situational. But my experience tells me it's not overpowered, because in certain games I can dominate in it, and in other games I cannot. It depends on the map you land on, and it depends on the circumstance in which your team are there. But that same rule applies to every single other tank. And I would love one of these on my own account. It's not going to happen, but I would love one of these, and that just reminds me that this tank just fits nicely in the tech tree after the Tortoise. I just wish Wargaming did a split from the Tortoise off to this or the Death Star. They're not going to remove a tank from the tech tree for us, but if they just did the split like they did with the T62A or the Object 140, I'd be happy playing this thing. But no, it's in a crate, which means it's behind a paywall, which means Skate will not get one. But that's it for this video, guys. I hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.